Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. One of the things I spent a lot of time doing when I was in my active addiction was just being by myself. I liked being by myself, and I could go through all the different reasons why that was comfortable for me. And most of all, it didn't require me to get outside of my comfort zone. I got anxious in social situations a lot. I was worried about saying the wrong thing. And then on the flip side, I also let myself be annoyed by people who I was around. And I think one of the big truths was that I didn't like being around other people because I had to keep my drug use and alcohol use under a little bit of more control in those situations. And by the end of my addiction especially, I much preferred to just be alone and be left alone so that I could use the way that I wanted to. But when in recovery, I was taught very early on that connection with others is one of the most important ways that we can recover. And I thought about that again today as I read a passage in Going to Pieces Without Falling Apart by Mark Epstein. And I'll read it right now. He says, Buddhism sees the ego as a kind of necessary fiction. We need an ego to function in the world, to carry out tasks, to get us to work on time, to do the laundry, and to master new information. But we have a tendency to overvalue its reality, obscuring a more expansive view of the kind of connections of which we are capable. In Buddhism, we must surrender the ego so that we can feel our connection to the universe. We do not move toward greater separation and individuation in this view. We move toward love and death. And that got me thinking about a couple of truths that are important to me in my recovery. One is that even though connection with other people is important and being around other people is important, the opposite of loneliness isn't togetherness. It isn't being with other people. The opposite of loneliness is love. And so one of the things that when I got out of treatment, I started getting into my recovery life, I really wanted to connect with other people and be social with them. But the pandemic hit and got in the way of doing that. And I started to feel lonely again because I wasn't around other people. And what I had to realize is that that was a situation where I could still fight against loneliness and the idea of loneliness by expressing love to people. And very fortunate that, because of social media, because of things like Zoom meetings and other easy ways to connect with people without being around them, I found ways to be able to do that even during the pandemic when I couldn't see that many people. And then the idea of connecting with the universe in general that's brought up in this passage, that also became really important to me, especially during the pandemic when I couldn't be around other people. Being out in nature, being in places where I could just be quiet and be with the world around me, and in a sense, kind of merge with the world around me and just not really think much about me as a person, but just try to be in the environment where I was. That became important as well. And both of those things combined contributed to an overall sense of peace, an overall peace of mind that really formed the foundation of the way that I try to interact with people and the universe around me on a daily basis now. So I do think that one of the things that is common with a lot of people in active addiction is that we isolate. We like to be alone, and we keep people at arm's length because there's this tendency to build ourselves up as individuals and to try to protect ourselves as individuals. what I've found in recovery is that by letting go of my need to protect myself, I open myself up for more connections. That's really been a critical part of this. I saw this happen with someone yesterday where they told me that they didn't bring something up to me because they were worried how I was going to react. And that gave me something to think about in the way that I react to things, but it's also an example of why we need to avoid doing those kinds of things. We need to avoid being scared of how other people are going to react and changing our behavior because of that, because it diminishes our ability to connect with those people. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be careful with the way that we deliver things or that we speak with other people. But it does mean that we need to give other people the opportunity to be themselves, to react to us the way that they want to react, and not place premeditated judgments on them just because we're scared of the way that what they might do could make us feel. All of this kind of comes together to the point that developing a sense of being an individual, we have to do it to operate within the world. But being able to let go of that need to protect ourselves and to be by ourselves and to not have the rest of the world influence us, that's become a really big part of my recovery. And letting those walls down a little bit, realizing that there's much more in common with me and the rest of the world than I thought at one point. That's been a huge part of my recovery. Looking for, as is said in AA, looking for the similarities rather than the differences, and starting to see my own identity, my own ego coming out in other people, and being able to love other people unconditionally. Those are the kinds of things that start to help me find more peace and serenity in my recovery. All of this working together has been a real big change for me, because in my active addiction, I really looked for any excuse I could to disconnect from the world around me. And these days, it's the opposite. These days, I really look for any excuse I can to connect with the people and the world around me, and to let go of some of the barriers that I spent so much time building up for myself to protect myself against things that weren't even trying to attack me in the first place. That's it for today. I hope you have a good one, and I'll be back here tomorrow with more.